Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Autumn 2021 series of the Virtual Museum Lecture Series presented by the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Center. Our community is filled with diverse stories, and we recognize that our story begins with the Indigenous peoples of this land. We acknowledge that we are broadcasting this lecture on lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for millennia, and we would like to honor the Indigenous peoples. We would like to honor the centuries of Indigenous peoples who walked on Turtle Island before us. My name is Sarah Nixon, a public programmer here at the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Center. Welcome back to the lecture series. We hope these lectures provide a bit of historical joy and also spark imagination and exploration of our city's rich history. If you're joining us for the first time, why not go back and view all our other lectures that have been presented in the last year or so? There are now over 20 lectures for you to enjoy. Just look for the playlist Virtual Museum Lecture Series on our YouTube channel. We are also happy to announce that the lecture audio is being added to our podcast. VMLS via podcast will help to share the lectures with an even wider audience. So if you're new, you can catch up via podcast. Or if you want to go back and listen to your favorite lecture again, it'll be there waiting for you in the coming weeks. As we dive into some exciting history tonight, please feel free to make use of the chat box to ask questions or to send comments. We will moderate them during and at the end of the presentation. I will note there is a slight delay in the broadcast, so if we miss your question, we will get to it at the end of the presentation. Now, as always, we have an exciting lineup for the fall series. And I'll take this opportunity now to remind you to mark your calendars for upcoming lectures, which include on November the 2nd, special guest, local historian, and chair of the city's Heritage Advisory Committee, Brian Nari, will be here to discuss the early court system starting in the 1780s and various court cases and records from early St. Catharines. In his talk, Woe Be the Malefactors, Early St. Catharines Court Records. On November 16th, I will use housing, suburban development, and sprawl as a lens to consider some of the major socioeconomic issues that face the people of St. Catharines in the 20th century by paying close attention to housing trends and issues in the city over time. We can gain vital insight into how big societal shifts impacted our community, from immigration to the Great Depression, the post-war boom, and more. And finally, on November 30th, Kathleen Powell will explore the world when the world was plunged into war in 1914 and how everything changed. Life would never be the same for those who fought and for those left behind. This lecture is a personal look at the First World War through the eyes and voices of those who lived through this life-changing moment in time. I'd like to take a moment to encourage you to make a donation to the museum in support of our programming. Your donations help us to continue to provide the high quality and enjoyable programming that you have come to expect from us. We really appreciate any donation you're able to make. Give us a call at 905-984-8880 during our operating hours to make a donation. And new this fall, you can now make a donation online via our ActiveNet portal. The link to the portal was included in our email reminder this evening. Your donations do make a difference, so thank you. Okay, everyone, I think that's enough to break the ice, don't you think? So let's drop the puck. Please welcome Adrian with his talk, Canada's Game in the Garden City.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We were Sarah and I were chatting about which hockey pun should we use to open the lecture. I'm glad you picked that one. I picked, and if you saw the email reminder this afternoon, everyone, I picked lace up your skates. That's enough. I think we can all agree. Thank you, everyone, very much for choosing a history lecture over the 11 NHL games scheduled for tonight, 6 of which began at 7 p.m. a few minutes ago. I will assume I have everyone's full attention, and that if you do have the game on in the background, it's on mute and it's playing on an entirely different screen somewhere in the background. If ever there was a mismatch of historian and topic in our virtual museum lecture series, it's me and hockey. I'm sure most of you are thinking, what's Adrian going to do with hockey? Growing up in Ottawa, I was required to be an Ottawa Senators fan. Since moving to St. Catharines, I've caught a few Ice Dogs games here and there, but I don't think that I can be described as a true hockey fan. Generally, though, I'm more of a player than a spectator. And unfortunately, I was never much of a skater or stick handler, so hockey was never my game. Additionally, the history of hockey and sports history in general is tricky for non-sports historians and non-sports people. There are a lot of statistics in sports, which are important to understanding the progression of sports and players. But if you're not into stats, they can easily overwhelm the more accessible narratives. In fact, accessible narratives are really hard to come by in most histories. Look at the NHL's history page on their website. It's not really in a narrative format at all, and it's just a mere timeline of interesting occurrences season by season. The bubble of hockey history is difficult for non-hockey historians. Aside from a general lack of primary sources and excellent but limited secondary sources, I believe I'll likely leave you with more questions than answers. Not a lot of historiographical attention has been paid to hockey, with the great exception of historian John Hewitt. And tonight's lecture is really only possible because of his diligent work. Indeed, if anyone is interested in more hockey history or a better hockey history than tonight's lecture, I heartily encourage you to pick up one of his books, which are widely available at the library. I also rely heavily on some of our reference files and newspaper articles to draw our picture tonight. I am extremely grateful to local historian Dennis Gannon, who in his own words, quote, "can't tell the difference between a hockey puck and a baseball bat," end quote, for sharing notes from his community research, which sometimes covers elements of the story that I'll tell tonight. Another caveat, if I may, that I should add here is that our story tonight really focuses on St. Catharines proper, but that doesn't mean that Meriton and Port Dalhousie didn't have similar and parallel experiences with hockey in their communities. Usually, the small town nature of those communities, however, meant that they didn't really or always compete on the same level as the larger cities in Niagara, which of course means that the sources available for early hockey narratives of those towns are quite limited. Though I'm sure most people with living or fond memories of hockey in smaller towns have lots and lots of history. I'm just particularly speaking about the primary and secondary sources. I'm also sorry in advance. This is the lecture of apologies. I'm also sorry in advance to those whose hockey favorites are not included tonight. If you have a favorite hockey memory, story, player, team, or whatever, feel free to share it in the comments and we'll chat more about it at the end of my presentation. We actually put out a call on social media a few months ago looking for favorite memories of favorite hockey memories, whatever it may be. And some of the feedback I got was, I have some great memories, but they're not really appropriate for you to share on a lecture. So that's probably why we weren't as successful, because most hockey memories, I'm sure, are exciting, adventurous, and personal. I am happy to say, though, that the biography of Stan Mikita, written by Stan Fischler, contains a wealth of story, narrative from Mikita's early days in St. Catharines, revealing a little bit about the hockey community mid-century. And if you get a chance to read it, it's quite enjoyable, really well written, a very easy read. We'll hear short quotes from Stan throughout the lecture tonight. Despite the lack of historical narrative, I firmly believe there is more to sports history than statistics, and I picked this topic not just to embarrass myself and not to give a record of games won or lost or famous players and coaches, but instead I had hoped to discover what it is that makes our community, what makes hockey so special to St. Catharines. More than any other sport, hockey has influenced our community, from planning and infrastructure projects to the social and fan side of sports clubs, to regional rivalries, and to some very famous, nay, legendary hockey players. Hockey is present in all corners of our community today, and it pops up through the years of mainstream narratives and non-sports narratives about St. Catharines. Today, I hope to explore the narrative surrounding hockey history in St. Catharines to better reveal the significance and mainstay of the sport in our city, and maybe even answer the question of what makes St. Kitts a hockey town. Even if you're not a sports or hockey fan, you must admit there's something special about Canada's game in the Garden City. Once I had the stick, I didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't like anything I had back home. But they had the puck there, and I knew I had to hit it. I wanted very much to be good this first time, and I concentrated very hard on making the right move. I took a big swing, like I was hitting a golf ball. I missed the puck and whacked the guy right in the shins. He was a nice guy. He didn't hit me. He just took me by the hand and with sign language showed me the right way to shoot the puck. Then he taught me my first words in English: stick, puck, shoot, and goal. That was Stan Mikita on his first days in St. Catharines. We know that the play of hockey and the culture surrounding the sport can change over time. Significant rule changes in the NHL during the 2005-2006 season were talked about for years. The introduction of a rule making helmets mandatory in 1979 and 1980 season was equally dramatic. And what we consider to be the fundamental part of the game, 3 20-minute periods, was introduced as a rule change in the 1910-1911 season from 2 30-minute periods. The organized and professional game being over 100 years old, it's obvious that the evolution of players' skills, technologies like video replay, sticks, skates, masks, and other equipment have changed the game throughout its history. The first organized rules of hockey were introduced in the 1870s, and the game was quickly taken up across Canada, including here in St. Catharines. Our earliest records of hockey in St. Catharines also date to the 1870s, mostly through early photographs of pickup games played on a frozen Welland Canal or organized games at Ridley College. Both women and men, boys and girls, enjoyed recreational ice hockey on backyard or neighborhood rinks. Organized or professional play in St. Catharines was limited to men, and so most of our story tonight focuses on the narratives of men, since that's where most of the source material focuses. But I think it's important to note, and perhaps a myth-busting one, that girls and women have always played ice hockey, and their contributions then and now should be given equal billing to that of men's play. My sister was always the better skater, always a better skater than I was. Can't skate backwards to save my life. So no doubt there are plenty of stories of girls out skating and outplaying boys on the ice that we just haven't heard yet. I wish I could do justice to their stories tonight. There is also plenty of participation in hockey from the Black community. We'll talk briefly about the story of the St. Catharines Orioles, but many Black players can actually be found on Niagara District teams and on other junior teams in the OHA prior to the 1930s. Unfortunately, their story too has been greatly missed. And so the material in tonight's lecture again focuses on the narratives of white men. Today, hockey culture is often described as being inside a bubble because it is an all-encompassing sport. Speak to any parent of a serious hockey kid, and it is an intense schedule and life. What strikes me about the early hockey community in St. Catharines was that it didn't seem to be contained inside of a cultural bubble as we experience it today. Hockey was just part of winter life in the city. Everyone seemingly played hockey, so hockey was part of everyone's life. It wasn't something that was so isolated to a particular group of people or a particular space, but something that people did in the spare time that they had and on what we might call neighborhood or pop-up rinks. Kids went out and played their own games with their own rules, and that's where skills development took place. Local industrial companies, local churches, local schools all had their own teams and were clearly an important part of the culture of those institutions and organizations. This sounds romanticized, but I charged only in comparison with the very advanced methodical progression of hockey advancement today. This early entrenchment of hockey into the daily lives of folks in early St. Catharines, along with the physical and financial importance of hockey infrastructure, the wild and legendary success of hockey teams like the TPs and the Blackhawks, and players like Stan Mikita, Bobby Hull, and Jerry Cheevers make hockey a fact of life and a fact of community in St. Catharines. The first league I played in was on that it had games in the early morning. I used to get up at 5:30 in the morning and ride on my bike out to the rink and just stand around and wait to be asked to play. It took half an hour to get to the rink, and sometimes I could practice for 2.25 hours before school began. Stan Mikita on local ice rink and arena travel. If we're going to look at the history of the game in the city, then we need to explore the history of where the game was played. Folks had been ice skating long before organized games of hockey took place and hockey took to the ice. Backyard and outdoor ice rinks were popular places to play hockey and practice skills and skate, but it's unlikely that organized leagues were able to use this ice because the size of ice pads and ice conditions varied widely. If the first organized game of modern ice hockey in Canada was played in Montreal in 1875, then certainly hockey was being played in St. Catharines at that time as well. There are many mentions in historical records of folks skating or playing hockey in the 1880s in St. Catharines, but the rinks rarely appeared in the same location year after year. These rinks were open air and probably homemade. That's the type of rink we're looking at in this picture at Montebello Park, or this one on the Welland Canal below Springbank House. Even the uniformed students at Ridley College played on an outdoor rink. Like today, you had to rely on luck to have a rink last longer than a weekend. And so the early season of hockey was quite short and restricted to the months that could support ice play, January, February, and maybe March. There's NHL games today and it's October, so it's a little bit different. As organized sports and leisure began to become more and more organized, teams and leagues needed places to play. The earliest record of a dedicated ice rink for professional hockey in St. Catharines is about at 1895. This is concurrent with most organized sports at the turn of the century. Tennis, baseball, field hockey, lacrosse, and even rowing all established their dedicated playing fields around the turn of the 20th century. So more on that 1895 rink in just a minute. The first official covered skating rink in the city appeared at Lake Street and Wellington Street, where the Canadian Canners plant once stood. The rink was used strictly for pleasure skating, and there is no record of hockey being played there. We aren't sure about when the rink was built, but the Palace Ice Rink, as it was called, was mentioned in an article in 1892. Quote, the Daily Standard, April 15th, Good Friday, 1892. A fire alarm for the Palace Ice Rink on Lake Street 4 houses on lake just across the road were badly damaged, and 2 dwellings on Welland Avenue burned, and several houses on Wellington Street opposite the rink caught fire many times but were extinguished. The huge rink, 5 occupied dwellings, and 2 barns were destroyed or damaged, end quote. The term huge, I think, is relative. It's probably bigger than your backyard rink or the Montebello Park rink, but not, Olympic or NHL sized as we might expect. And and the little star, if you're wondering where that is, the little star right there. In 1895, senior hockey was first organized in Niagara with the very early beginnings of the Niagara District Hockey League. This league is about as close to what we would consider professional hockey, including spectators paying to watch games and out-of-town league players traveling to different cities to play games. According to sources, sorry, it's so blurry, this 1875 lithograph, you can see, I'll just circle with my mouse here. You can see a little bit there, and then we'll zoom in. According to the sources, the St. Catharines Rink was located behind the Robertson Public School on Church Street inside the drill hall belonging to the 7th Battery. Built long before the Lake Street Armory was built, a barn-like building was used for drill and storage, with officers' meetings taking place at the Welland House Hotel. The drill hall was completed in 1868, and it's really just a big barn, as you can sort of decipher through this blurry picture. In 1873, the students of the, and here's a better picture of it, really just a big barn. In 1873, the students of Robertson School weren't actually able to use the hall for gym as they regularly did, because there were 700 pounds of gunpowder stored in the barn. So that gives you a sense of the type of building that we have for professional ice hockey in 1895. Some sources say the ice space was approximately 60 by 160 feet. It's quite smaller than today's NHL ice, which measures 82 by 200 feet. But the dimensions of the building were likely closer to 70 by 120 feet. And so the ice pad was likely even smaller than those original estimates. Some seating was installed above the gun sheds on the north end of the building. The drill shed was torn down, unfortunately, following the same 1898 cyclone that ran through Meriton and damaged the roof beyond repair, as you can see in this photograph, after the tornado went through. From 1898 to about 1906, hockey games, both amateur and professional, played on various outdoor rinks that seemed to pop up at the most unlikely of places, including behind the Grand Opera House over here on Ontario Street, behind the Mansion House, also over here on Ontario Street, on the Welland Canal below St. Paul Street, likely around Lock 3 and or 4, and below Springbank House Hotel, as we saw in those photographs, which is just off the map here. So I just put the star at the bottom of the map. Also on North Street, up here, and also on Balfour Street, which is just off the map, and that might have been on early NSNT land before the big terminal was built later on. Additionally, there were rinks at Lakeside Park, which is not on this map of downtown, and of course at Ridley College, as we've shown already, they had an outdoor rink for their students. It's interesting to me that where and when to play has always been a theme of organized hockey. Anyone trying to get ice time knows this struggle. Indeed, our local varsity team doesn't have its own on-campus rink, so the Brock Badgers play their games at Seymour Hanna Arena on St. Paul West. In and around 1906, a covered rink was built on Phelps Street, which is now Reardon Street. It was built by the Cameron brothers, who owned and operated the McLaren & Co. department store on St. Paul Street. One of the Cameron brothers, Robert Cameron, managed the rink and the local professional hockey team. One has to wonder if the Camerons were tired of not having an indoor rink to play on and built one themselves to make sure that their team had home ice. Don't forget, games were played outdoors in the evenings in January and February. Reports of frostbite from crowds of fans wasn't uncommon. In 1906, the St. Catharines Standard reported that the rink was available for skating year-round, roller skating in spring and autumn, and ice skating in January, February, and March. There was space for approximately 2,500 spectators. Another report from December 24th, 1908 says, quote, "Now that all schedules have been drawn up, Manager Cameron wishes all clubs that want practice hours will apply at once so that they can be arranged. The rink will be reserved for skating 3 nights a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be hockey nights. Some things, like assigning ice times, never change." That 1908 season had a professional team for St. Catharines, or for St. Kitts. It looks like they were called the St. Kitts Professionals. Very creative name. And they played in the Canadian Professional League against other Ontario cities, including Brantford, Toronto, Kitchener, which was called Berlin at the time, Guelph, and Galt. None of the players were from St. Catharines, which also gives us the sense that of a well-developed professional hockey culture and league to support professional hockey. The article goes on to make sure that the reader knows that this will be fast hockey compared to probably like amateur hockey on the Welland Canal, which is probably slower than what we're used to. The St. Catharines Roller Rink, I've circled here on this aerial photo. It's just up to the top right. St. Catharines Roller and Ice Rink wasn't open for long. The building was purchased in 1910 by Packard Electric for manufacturing Rio cars. By 1912, and if you want a little bit more history about the Rio car manufacturing in St. Catharines, you can check out Kathleen's lecture about the horseless carriage on our lecture playlist. By 1912, Rio had built a new factory a few blocks away because the rink was, quote, "not fit for winter operations," end quote, probably because it was an ice rink. So it probably wasn't insulated. Must have been awful to work in a car factory with no heat. They kept the building as storage at least until 1935, when it was reopened again as the Queensbury Stadium. Queensbury Stadium was in existence alongside the Garden City Arena when it was opened in 1938, but by 1940 had changed hands again. Considering St. Catharines was desperate for indoor professional quality ice and an arena, the Queensbury must have been just a band-aid solution for hockey after having acted as a warehouse for so long. The building has morphed since, but the basics of it are still there on Reardon Street now, just across the street from the Garden City Arena. You can see here too on the 1923 fire insurance plan, and later on the 1943 fire insurance plan, it's been listed as storage pretty much every time I go to find it. It's listed as Packard Electric storage. So it's hard to know, maybe it was cleared out for a night to play a game, basically, is the idea. Not a stable or reliable source of ice for hockey, of course. By the 1930s, professional level teams were also traveling to Grimsby and to Niagara Falls, and later Thorold, as those cities all had better ice facilities than St. Catharines to play home games. It's like also like the Blue Jays playing down in Buffalo or in Florida during the last season until they came home. Playing a home game in not your home stadium isn't very much fun. The story of the building of the Garden City Arena, which came to the rescue of senior and junior hockey in St. Catharines, is probably the most told story of hockey history in the city. Oh, and I've added a little map. This is where we're talking about with the St. Catharines Roller and Ice Rink, or the Queensbury Stadium later. So it's actually just across the street from the Garden City Arena. We here in St. Catharines know very well by now that any major construction project is going to be expensive and is going to face a few challenges. the Garden City Arena project was a tricky one to get off the ground. And this story very much reminds me of building the Marilyn I. Walker School of Fine and Performing Arts, the Performing Arts Center, and the Meridian Center, in that the stars of private and public investment had to align to make it all possible. And that the expectations of building the arena was sort of a savior of hockey culture in St. Catharines. The same is true for the Garden City Arena on a much smaller scale, I should mention. City Council had just built a brand new and quite large City Hall to replace the offices that were housed in the former Clendenin House on the same property. And that had served the city as city halls and operations since 1878. So after a brand new city hall, public funds for a new hockey rink had been discussed for years, but the spark to build was seemingly lit by our neighbor Thorold, which had completed a brand new ice arena in 1937. In an article from a few years ago, our friend and local historian Dennis Gannon mentioned that, quote, it seems that to a lot of our local movers and shakers, the idea of Little Thorold having a first-class ice rink when we didn't was unacceptable. St. Catharines had to have a first-class ice rink too, ASAP, end quote. Despite plenty of financial obstacles, including the lasting effects of the Great Depression and the expense of the new City Hall, as I mentioned, the project went forward, but only through the efforts of Mayor Todd Daly, along with Rex Steimers and Bill Newman, and others who led a door-to-door campaign to raise half of the $100,000 needed to complete the project. The other half was put up by the city. Of course, the project was over budget, and so there wasn't enough money to pay for the seats. Kind of important for fans to sit. Local businessman H.G. Touch loaned the city money to pay for the seating. So to pay him back, oh, and I should mention just before I get into this story, I should mention there you can see the Queensbury Stadium on the 1943, and again it's listed as storage. So almost hard to believe they played hockey there in an enjoyable manner, and you can see how much smaller it is than the actual Garden City Arena. So HG Touch loaned the city money to pay for the seating, beautiful seating, as you can see there. And to pay him back, a little exhibition game was organized with Conn Smythe, owner and manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He brought the NHL team to play one period against each of the three local senior teams from St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, and Port Colborne, so one period each. The game attracted a sellout crowd of 3,500 fans, which raised enough money to pay back the loan for seating. Hockey was here to stay. The reporting and photographic coverage of this exhibition game has been a bit confusing for some non-sports historians and those unfamiliar with the local hockey story, who spend some time trying to find a record of a professional NHL hockey team in St. Catharines that would have played the Toronto Maple Leafs. Indeed, just by looking at some of these photographs, there isn't much to delineate between the NHL pros and the local senior pros on the ice. I bring this up not only because it causes frequent confusion, but because it lends itself well to understanding the varied and fluid organization of early professional hockey. Bucko, McDonald with the ears on the right. Garden City Arena was at the center of senior and junior hockey for decades until the Meridian Center was built in 2014-2015. Sadly, the Garden City complex, which now consists of the Rex Steimers Rink and the Jack Gatecliff Rink, is set to be decommissioned at the end of this year. Aside from the Meridian Center, other arenas around the city include the Bill Burgoyne Arena on Linwell Road and the Seymour Hanna Four-Pad Arena on St. Paul West, which are operated by the city. The Meriton Centennial Arena, which is owned by the city and operated by the Meriton Lions Club, is actually just wrapping up a major $2.2 million renovation to replace equipment that has reached its life expectancy. These rinks, whether built in 1906 or 2015, represent an incredibly large financial infrastructure investment and show that the architecture of hockey is as embedded into our sense of place as the game is embedded into the collective identity of those who live here. I quickly developed a love of hockey, and when I was 9, I began playing in Little League that was supposed to be for boys 12 to 14. I seemed that I spent all my time on the streets playing hockey, which I quickly improved my English. A year later, a check was made on the league's players, and it was discovered that I was underage. I was 10 and they figured I'd played a year, so why not let me continue? I didn't mind. I could always get out of the way of the bigger kids. Stan Mikita on his early league experience in St. Catharines. As we've discussed already this evening, our idea of what professional, I've air quoted every single time, professional hockey means does not quite apply to early professional hockey in St. Catharines, say about before 1930. So our idea of, structure with a manager and a coach and like a long season and that's all you did was play hockey is doesn't really apply even to junior hockey in later on in the more successful years. So professional teams, of course, did exist. Players were paid, players traveled, out of town players played on other cities' teams, etc. They played numerous games throughout the winter seasons, and they were made up of professional players, most of whom again came from outside of St. Catharines or outside of the city. They had managers and coaches and owners and etc. and sponsors. But again, we have to really keep in mind the very early development of league play and professional play at this time. The leagues and levels of players too was less sophisticated, so that there was clearly some overlap of players between teams, and the makeup of leagues was quite chaotic and not quite as stable as we've come to expect. Picture like this of, unfortunately, an unloaned hockey team. They've got uniforms, they've got a manager, they've got a sponsor, but this picture is static. We have no idea what happened in 1896, and quite frequently, like the St. Kitts professionals, they played 3 seasons and then were never heard of again. In addition, that Canadian Professionals League was also gone quite quickly. Players too, again, were not paid in the millions. Most players worked other jobs to support themselves, their families, and their hockey dreams. In addition to the mainstream teams, like the junior teams or the senior teams, there were plenty of school and industrial teams. As I mentioned already, players made up of workers from factories or even student teams sponsored by local factories, like the Lightning Fastener hockey team. They also had baseball teams in the summer, and the Hayes Steel team. I mentioned earlier, girls hockey was also popular, and the Monarch Knitting Company sponsored a local girls team in 1940, and they also probably likely made those jerseys for them. There was a few advertisements we found recently in a Maple Leaf Gardens program advertising Monarch Knitting Co. as the maker of Toronto Maple Leaf jerseys. I should add too that over time, the team and league names have slowly become disassociated from different levels of hockey, so that it's difficult to get a sense of which league we had a team in and which we didn't, which league covered which level of senior or junior hockey, what kind of level of hockey each team was playing, who they played against at various levels, and what significance that has to the game in general. A Canadian professional league, as I've mentioned a few times already, was actually apparently called the Ontario Professional Hockey League. So they just went back and forth between those names. Operated between 1908 and 1911. So very short lifespan on that particular league. They're the ones who gave us our St. Kitts Professionals. The lineup for the St. Kitts Professionals in 1908 was detailed in the St. Catharines Standard. The team consisted of Mark Tuzzi in goal from Toronto, James McGuinness playing point from Berlin or Kitchener, cover point Hank Smith from Cornwall, rover Donald Smith, also from Cornwall, possibly Hank's brother. Left wing Bert Bennett from Bridgeburg was also the captain. They had yet to sign a center and a right wing at the time of the article in December. The article continued by saying Mark Tuzzi, Quote, Mark Tuzzi, the man between the flags, is well known all over the hockey world and has experience in playing with such teams as the Wellingtons, St. George's, Toronto Professionals, Manitoba, and Pittsburgh's, and goes to show that he's the best guarding the nets today, end quote. This note about Mark Tuzzi, the goalie from Toronto, gives us a glimpse of the kind of hockey community and the league structure available to a professional player as early as 1908. Story of the Ontario Hockey Association, though, is really the main thread of junior hockey in St. Catharines. The association was founded in 1890 to organize rules of play for junior leagues around the province, and numerous leagues and teams from St. Catharines have been members throughout its history. The Niagara District Junior Hockey League was the main tenet of junior hockey at the turn of the century in Niagara, with teams in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Niagara Falls, Port Colborne, Fort Erie, Welland, Thorold, Lincoln, Port Dalhousie, and St. Catharines. Most of the information about these teams is only available in newspapers reporting on gameplay, and not much work has been done to unearth the narratives around rivalries, players, and culture. Most of their history is difficult to track, but meeting minutes from December 30th, 1930 express hesitancy to join the Ontario Hockey Association that year. Most of the minutes from the 1929-1930 season convey financial difficulty, a situation which most leagues and teams of the day faced. Interestingly, the NDJHL, Niagara District League, should not be confused with the later OHL Junior C League, called Niagara and District Hockey League, which was founded in 1974 and merged with the Provincial Junior Hockey League in 2016. Our local team is the Niagara Riverhawks that play out of the Gale Center in Niagara Falls. In late 1936, Touch Woods, remember the gentleman who loaned the money to get the seats? He was the owner of a local trucking company, and his friend Wally Walker, a florist and member of the St. Catharines Lions Club, decided that they wanted to sponsor a hockey team made up of players from Salem Chapel British Methodist Episcopal Church. We're pictured here. Here are the St. Catharines Orioles outside the BME Church in 1937. There was a group at BME already playing together, but not in organized competition. The churchgoers accepted the sponsorship offer. They wore orange sweaters with 4 black stripes on the arms and the letters TST stitched across the chest for Toronto St. Catharines Transport, which was the name of Wood's trucking company. The Orioles played in the 8-team Niagara District Hockey League, as we've talked about a little bit already, traveling to face off against squads from towns like Fonthill, Homer, Jordan, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Port Weller, Thorold, and Welland. Many of the games were played outdoors, including on the locks of the Welland Canal. Again, just a year before the Garden City Arena was built. To get to away games, the team traveled in the back of one of Wood's flatbed trucks, covered with a tarp to shield them from winter winds. It wasn't uncommon for the Orioles to have only one extra player on the bench, while the other teams were rolling 2 or 3 lines off their bench every 3 minutes. The church team may have been undermanned, but they definitely weren't soft. By all accounts, all of the players were multi-sport athletes, and several boxed, including Amos Dorsey, who later went on to become an Ontario champion. Most of the players worked at General Motors. Of course, despite the presence of black players on mostly white teams, some white players refused to play against an all-black team. They faced prejudice in the press, and the owners were perhaps tokenizing the team in hopes of arranging a game against an all-Chinese team from Montreal to play at Maple Leaf Gardens. The records of the Niagara District League are limited, and unfortunately, there isn't a record of how well the Orioles competed. The Orioles had split up after a couple of seasons, like most teams in these days of hockey. Most players joined other teams, and interesting to note that some players had already been playing on other teams. Don't know how that works. The first team to call the Garden City Arena its home in the late 1930s and early 1940s was the St. Catharines Chiefs, later renamed the Saints. They were a senior A team that played until 1945. As John Hewitt puts it, from, quote, from 1943 to present day, junior A hockey, or the OHL, has dominated the local hockey scene, end quote. The St. Catharines Junior A Falcons. So I think for most of the lecture remaining, we're going to be talking about Junior A hockey, which most people, it's like the step below the NHL. Okay. Our Falcons was the first Junior A team to play at Garden City Arena. Famous hockey player Rudy Pilas, who had played for the Chiefs and the Saints in the Senior A team, talked 6 local businessmen into financing a new Junior A team to play at the Garden City Arena. Rudy's involvement with the team was off and on as he took on new opportunities in the hockey community throughout North America, including scouting, managing, and coaching. In 1947, George Stauffer, president of Thompson Products, rescued the Falcons from financial trouble and bought the Falcons for $2,500 and then renamed the team the Teepees in honor of the company's name. The unfortunate logo design doesn't quite reflect this to our modern eyes. Not everyone realizes that the unfortunate connection between the negative imagery of the Indigenous peoples in their logo that actually supposed to, it's like very unfortunate use of Indigenous peoples and the TP idea to go along with Thompson Products. At one time, junior teams sometimes had a relationship with the professional NHL teams, kind of like the farm team system in the Major League Baseball. The TPs under Rudy's leadership had won the Memorial Cup in 1954, and here's that team, 1954, and again in 1960. They were affiliated with the American Hockey League's Buffalo Bisons, not the baseball team, but the American Hockey League's Buffalo Bisons. And when the Chicago Blackhawks made the Bisons their number 1 farm team, Chicago also inherited the TPs. If you're confused, it's okay. I was for a very long time. In 1962, due to a rigmarole of financial difficulties, Bill Henry became the new owner of the team, and the name was changed, confusingly enough, to the St. Catharines Blackhawks. So the Chicago Blackhawks are their parent team, and now they're the St. Catharines Blackhawks. The early 1970s Blackhawks team is the stuff of legends. With hundreds of points and plenty of wins and some of the best players in the OHA, the Hawks faced the Quebec Ramparts in the 1971 Eastern Canada Final ahead of the Memorial Cup. In addition to a hot rivalry between the teams, the matchup between 2 great junior superstars, Guy Lafleur and Marcel Dion, drew huge attention. The first 2 games of the playoff series were played in St. Catharines, with the next 2 played in Quebec. Both games 3 and 4 featured major fights on the ice. To give you a sense of the heat, there were 102 penalties given in game 3, 77 of them, can't imagine 77 penalties, to the Blackhawks. So who is instigating? I don't know. Fans, though, threw eggs and golf balls at the players during the game and harassed Dion's parents, who were in the stands, for letting him play for an English team. And they were from Quebec, so he had previously played for a Quebec team and then moved to St. Catharines to the Blackhawks. Things boiled over in Game 4 when Hawks player Mike Bloom accidentally struck a policeman with his stick at the end of the game because he was trying to hit a fan that had spat on him. He said it was an accident, but the players were forced to flee the arena because a mob had quickly formed. The Quebec police were unable to control the crowd. The players got on the bus, but angry fans pelted it with bottles, then followed the bus to the Hawks Hotel and remained in the parking lot. The series continued with Game 5, played at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto on neutral territory. And the Hawks won that game, but team president and general manager Fred Muller refused to bring the team back to Quebec for Game 6, and the series was forfeited. Interestingly, Muller was suspended by the league for refusing to go back to Quebec, but he was named 1971 Sportsman of the Year in St. Catharines. The luster of fame and popularity of the Blackhawks, along with ticket sales, faded quite quickly despite their success on the ice. Team management couldn't keep up with costs with incredibly low ticket sales, and when they couldn't sell the team, they moved it to Niagara Falls. And then it was moved around and around and around after that. I should note that not all fans gave up on the Hawks. 3 fans are particularly so passionate about the game and the teams that they earn themselves a special place in history and in tonight's lecture. Gladys Crow was asked by Fred Muller to form the St. Catharines Blackhawks Junior A Supporters Club in 1967. Crow arranged for fan bus trips for road games, wrote bulletins that were inserted into the programs, and trained fans to be cheerleaders. After the club attracted a few hundred members, she arranged dances and social evenings to raise money for a team banquet at the end of each season. Her club also presented awards and plaques to the players and team personnel, as you can see here at the awards banquet in 1972, in April 1972, for the 1971-1972 season. And then gifts were also organized and given to any players who had to spend any time in the hospital. Another pair of super fans were John and Helen Brown, also known as the Bellringers. The Browns attended every single home game of the Teepees, Blackhawks, and Finn Cups. It's a long time, between 1952 and 1977. They were given their famous Bellringers name because of the bell, which you can see here on the screen, which they rang during games at the Garden City Arena. They were actually given Bellringers the name by Rudy Pilas. The 1976 Memorial Cup champions, the Hamilton Finn Cups, briefly moved to St. Catharines for one season, also briefly renaming the team the St. Catharines Finn Cups. They tried to make a go of it, but unfortunately, again, ticket sales did not support a team in St. Catharines. They moved back to Hamilton the following season. From 1977, St. Catharines was without a junior team until the Niagara Ice Dogs were founded in 2007. In just 33 years of junior hockey, 124 players who played for St. Catharines teams made it to the NHL, and 5 of those were inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame: Pierre Pilote, Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita, Phil Esposito, and Marcel Dion. If there's one thing that people believe in, it is that you have to have the all-American outlook, the boy next door type of thing, the image. Now, before the 1966-1967 season, I never thought much about an image, with people. If I lost a tough game, or if we lost a tough game and I came out of the stadium, I sure as hell didn't want to stand around for 15 minutes signing autographs, and I still don't. But I will stop to sign an autograph for the kids, and I think that this has helped my image. Stan Mikita on the celebrity of hockey. As long as professional sports has been around, the celebrity of players has been a part of the industry. Remember the St. Kitts Professionals from 1908. The hockey prowess of the individuals on the team were widely publicized, even more so than the team itself. The speed of their skating, the agility of their stick skills, the amazingness of their goalie keeping, and even some personal details were all part of the hockey narrative and way of life, even way back in 1908. Hometown hockey heroes is a phrase we hear a lot because the NHL covers such a wide swath of geography all over Canada and the United States. The idea that folks from little old St. Kitts can appear on the big stage in the continent's major cities and play with major storied teams creates an unmatched sense of pride for our little town. So much so that the success of our hometown hockey heroes, even those who merely played in St. Catharines for even one season, overshadows the entire existences of fellow teammates. These hockey gods are altogether worshipped and glorified as a representation of St. Catharines as the cradle of hockey greatness. Other sports, too, can generate pride when our athletes reach the big stage, like at the Olympics this summer. But I've said throughout my lecture tonight that there's something about hockey pumping out masterful athletes that encourages successive generations to reach the same heights. As I mentioned previously, our junior teams in St. Catharines advanced 124 players to the NHL in 33 years. I must mention some of them, of course, and they include Marcel Dion. He was selected second in the NHL draft by the Detroit Red Wings in 1971, second to Guy Lafleur, his little rival there. He had led the Junior A League for 3 years. He played with the St. Catharines Blackhawks. He also played for the LA Kings later and the New York Rangers and retired in 1989. Another name we might recognize is Brian Cullen. Brian played for the Junior A Teepees and was on the 1954 Memorial Cup team, along with his brother Barry. Jerry Cheevers is a very storied hockey player born in St. Catharines. He played for the Maple Leafs in 1961 to 65, then for the Bruins beginning in 1965. He was in goal for the Bruins when they won the Stanley Cup in 1970 and 1972. And after he retired in 1980, he became the first St. Catharines-born NHL coach and coached the Bruins until 1985. His very famous goalie mask, marked with the count of how many times the puck hit his face mask instead of his face, has inspired goalie mask art for decades and is here in the museum's collection. While they aren't particularly famous, Cecil and brother Ed Huckstra played for the Junior ATPs in the 1950s, and volunteer extraordinaire / member of the museum's advisory committee, Des Corin, stumbled across Cecil's gravestone at Victoria Lawn Cemetery, which has now inspired discussion of including hockey stories on our annual guided spirit walks at the cemetery. I look forward to putting on skates at the cemetery. Dennis Hull played for the St. Catharines Teepees before playing for the Chicago Blackhawks. Little brother to Bobby. And then, of course, there's likely the two most famous hockey players to come out of St. Catharines, Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita. Their styles were dramatically different. Bobby Hull was the explosive winger with the booming slap shot and the flowing blonde locks. His face doesn't look very happy to be in this picture on the right. It's kind of like, okay, take the picture already. But he was known for his good looks. Stan Mikita was the precision passer and gritty playmaker who wore a helmet long before the rules required one. In fact, there's a really funny quote of him saying, "I would rather be alive to cut the lawn this summer than not wear a helmet." So long before the rules required a helmet. Bobby was promoted to the Chicago Blackhawks from the TPs in 1957, and then Stan in 1959. In 1961, their teamwork was credited for their Stanley Cup win. They also both won the Lady Byng Trophy for most gentlemanly player, and they also set multiple scoring records individually. While their personal narratives are quite different, Hull was the handsome, blonde, all-American hockey hero any publicist would dream of. Mikita was the small, more rugged immigrant who had a harder time connecting with fans. Their individual stories are quite famous and readily accessible, so I don't want to go too much further into their amazing teamwork and careers, but their friendship and their rivalry are inherently connected and started in St. Catharines. As I mentioned a few times already, there are hundreds of famous players who came from or passed through St. Catharines on their way to the NHL. And I would never be able to cover them all. And maybe there's some recent ones too. I have no idea from the Ice Dogs. I'm sure there are a few from the Ice Dogs who went up. So if I missed any, or if you're smarter than I am, or you know your hockey heroes better than I do, feel free to go ahead and post their names in the chat box. We moved around St. Catharines a lot. In different places, I was a different kid. I was between 14 and 16, the age when I wanted to drive a car and go out with the boys and steal a few hubcaps and all that, which is what we did. But then the best thing that ever happened to me was getting on the hockey club. Let's stand Mikita on a troubled youth and the power of hometown hockey. St. Catharines loves sports, but to some advanced degree, which I hope I managed to measure tonight in tonight's lecture, hockey has a special power here in St. Catharines. Yes, rowing and baseball have rich histories here, and even less mainstream sports like ball hockey, lacrosse, track and field are well established and maybe shouldn't even be called less mainstream. But I say again, hockey has a special presence in our city and in our collective identity. It has a strong and important physical and financial presence in the city, in the history of the city, and throughout its geography. There is an excitement that captures players and fans. It has an emotional power over us through the pride of the glory days of legendary teams and legendary players, so that we are connected together through its history and culture. Something about hockey in St. Catharines caught my attention as a historian, all the stuff that I've included in tonight's lecture. It is that more so than in other cities and communities that I feel the Garden City loves Canada's game. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Instead of me trying to stick-handle questions, I have no hope of being able to answer, although I'll try if I know the answer. I would love to hear your hockey memories and stories, which we weren't able to share widely in the lecture tonight. Please go ahead and put them in the chat box now, and we'll spend a few minutes reminiscing about hockey together. Before that, though, and while we wait, I'll pass it back to Sarah, who will wrap us up.
Oh, Adrian, thank you so much. That was such a fun and informative lecture. I will admit that I am someone with a very limited knowledge in sports history, but I am so amazed at how we can use hockey to explore so many threads of St. Catharines history. So I really appreciated that. And I love what you said, that hockey has such a special power and presence in our community. So thank you for delving into this story. All right, to our audience, if you have any questions or comments for Adrian, or would like to share any hockey memories, please do keep it virtual museum lecture rated, please. And please post these in the chat box now. And while we wait for any comments, I'll go into my little conclusion spiel here. Thank you to you, our viewers, for attending tonight's lecture and for all of your support this season for the virtual museum lecture series. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation, please consider making a donation to the museum so that we can continue to deliver the high quality programming you expect from us. To make a donation, please call the museum during our operating hours at 905-984-8880. And new this fall, again, you can make a donation online through the city's ActiveNet portal. This link to the portal was included in our email reminder this evening. So just go back to your emails. Your donations do make a difference. So thank you. And with our wonderful, wonderful guests, we've now delivered over 20 lectures. So please check out the playlist of previous lectures on our YouTube channel or catch the audio on our special podcast, VMLS via podcast. We would also like to remind everyone to please like, follow, and subscribe on all of our social media channels, including right here on YouTube, as well as WordPress and our podcasts, wherever you get podcasts. If you enjoy our content, please share it in your networks to help more of our community join in our historical adventures. Okay, so we will see you all next time on November 2nd for Woe Be to the Malefactors Early St. Catharines Court Records with special guest Brian Nari. This virtual museum lecture series is produced by the St. Catharines Museum and Welland Canal Center and the City of St. Catharines. That is my conclusion. So let's open it up to the comments. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, one thing, actually, Sarah, I was just thinking about too, because I saw that Kathleen has joined us as well. She was delivering another lecture, actually, but she joined us. And one thing that I didn't include in the lecture proper, but thought was interesting as well in the infrastructure part of the talk, we have been chasing the military drill sheds pre-armory for quite a while. There's record of a drill shed in the Yates Street district. There's record of, and then the actual drill hall proper behind Robertson School. And I was working on a completely different project when I looked at the 1875 lithograph and I said, what the heck? There's the drill hall. And it just goes to show that, the kids from Robertson School used it as their gym. The Niagara District League used it as a hockey rink in the winter. Obviously the military used it for their purposes. And it just goes to show what kind of community, what kind of community spaces we had available to us at the end of the 19th century. And I think it gives a really interesting picture of a really well-rounded life in St. Catharines that we don't actually hear quite a lot about, because we spend so much time looking at narratives kind of in silos. So I hope tonight has given a not only a good history of hockey, but also a good well-rounded sort of history of kind of life and recreation in the city. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
I think that absolutely came through. I found it really fascinating, especially the like you say, the different areas that we played hockey throughout the city and throughout history. I thought that was really interesting. We do have a few memories to share. First, I'm just looking down through the comments. Jerry says, thanks, Adrian. He wishes that he was exposed to this in the mid-60s when he arrived in Canada, knowing nothing about ice hockey. So that's super fun. And Kay Holden seems to have a couple memories to share. He says, every winter, my parents made an ice rink in our backyard in St. Catharines, where all of my brothers and I practice our hockey skills from the book, Hockey Here's How.
Nice. I can relate to that. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning that my sister was a much better skater. I don't know how, she must have done figure skating. I can't quite remember, but our backyard rink on the farm was like a puddle that froze over. We never made a proper rink near the house. We had to go to the field and look for a puddle to skate on. So that's probably why I can't skate backwards. I can skate forwards. But I could never figure out the stick situation. I can only do one thing at a time. That's why I like sports like football, and I play ultimate frisbee as well. So you have direct contact with the thing. There's no stick involved. I don't like the stick sports. So anyway, that's a great memory. And that's really, really awesome. I'm sure that memory is shared by a lot of people on the lecture tonight.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kay Holden also says his favorite memory is of his brother Dave taking me to see a game at the arena to see Marcel Dion play. Hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yep.
The game was tied 5-5, but my brother managed to catch a puck that flew over the glass.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Whenever you can get a puck, or dare I say a baseball at a baseball game, a home run, it's that feeling of yes. So that's awesome. Getting a puck is definitely, I got a puck at a Sens game once. Usually we sat up in the nosebleeds, but I think we got tickets from my dad's work or something like that for the lower seats. And I got a puck one time, and that I remember getting a puck. Yeah, it's great. It's a great feeling.
Oh, absolutely. Especially because this was played by these famous hockey players that you admire. And now you get to hold some of that they touched.
And that means you get to be best friends with them.
Naturally. Kay Holden also says, remarkably, my research into our family tree revealed that on my father's side, Frederick Stanley, the 16th Earl of Derby, was my first cousin, 9 times removed, who gave us the Stanley Cup.
Amazing. That's
Wow.
awesome. That's really, really cool. That's a great connection. I didn't get into any trophies, cups very much because those histories are really widely available. So if anybody's interested in learning more about the Stanley Cup or the Memorial Cup or this cup or that cup and so on and so forth, definitely it's everywhere. So you can check that out. That's awesome. It's not as difficult to find as the history of the drill hall. I'm so glad we figured it out because it was like weeks and weeks of searching and consternation that Kathy and I had.
Oh, awesome. And then we have lots of thank yous for such an excellent lecture. Beth Shepard shares a little bit about some more famous ice hockey or ice dog players. I'm afraid I'm gonna say their names wrong, but Alex Pietrangelo, Angelo, and Rudy Pius. Oh God,
And it's so
Pilis.
that's really ironic because Beth also says that I've been pronouncing it wrong. And I was so nervous that I was pronouncing it wrong. I looked it up a couple of different times in different places and I thought I had it right, but it is Pilis. Thank you very much, Beth,
Yes.
for that. You met him once, eh? Apparently he was a character. Beth, if you're still on, if you got any funny character stories about Rudy, apparently he was quite the character. And Stan and him actually butted heads quite a bit. That's straight out of the book, Stan Mikita's biography there. So if there's any funny stories about Rudy, who's a pretty big hockey character. Anyway, yeah. Thanks.
That's awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Cool. Sarah, did you have any questions before we take off?
I just found it fascinating. I was more like kind of eating or watching with like popcorn, just like fascinating because I knew absolutely nothing about the topic. So this was really, really interesting. No, I felt like I wanted to like watching a hockey game, like just getting in the mood. But anyway.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, we will leave it there, everybody, because I'm sure you have hockey games to get to watching. So there are 11 games. So I will leave it there. And thank you so much, everybody, for attending tonight. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for our special guest, Brian Nari.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Good night. Awkward.